Okay, so in this video here, we're going to be talking about completing the square when a is equal to 1. So again, when completing the square, you're trying to solve a quadratic. It's another method of solving a quadratic. So typically when we solve a quadratic, we like to factor. But you can also do something called completing the square. And this will be useful as you keep progressing through Algebra 2 and you start getting into things like circles. Because when you start dealing with circles, you have to know how to complete the square, okay? So we're going to be talking about completing the square when a is equal to 1. So there's some steps to follow here. And again, we should probably talk about what a even means here. We're talking about a quadratic in standard form. So for example, we know that a quadratic in standard form is going to be ax squared plus bx plus c, okay? So when I'm talking about a, I'm talking about that a coefficient in front of x squared right here, okay? So on all of these examples here, a will be equal to 1. Now, there's some steps you have to follow when completing the square. I listed out 4 steps that you want to follow. Follow these in order and you should have no problem doing these problems. Step 1 says make sure the quadratic is in the format x squared plus or minus bx equal to c. So this plus or minus here is just indicating that that bx term could be either positive or negative. It doesn't matter, okay? Now, notice here that my a value is 1, right? Technically, there's a 1 in front of this x squared, and that's my a coefficient. So when you complete the square, it's very important that a is always equal to 1. Now, on these examples here, you don't have to worry about it. All of the a values are going to be equal to 1 on these examples. But there's going to be other problems where a is not equal to 1, and you may be trying to complete the square. Well, in that case there, the problem becomes a little more challenging, but I actually have a video on that as well, completing the square when a is not equal to 1, so make sure you check that out. I'll go ahead and link it in the description box below, that way you have access to that content. But just focusing on this video, again, step 1, make sure the quadratic is in the format x squared plus or minus bx equal to c. So again, we have to move that constant over to the right-hand side. So if you look at my equation here in standard form, technically it's equal to 0. So what you need to do here is move this constant term over to the right-hand side and also make sure that your a value is equal to 1. Okay, that's what you have to do before you even complete the square. Once you do that, you go to step 2. It says add b over 2 squared on both sides. Okay, so again, when we're talking about b, we're talking about this coefficient right here. Okay, whatever value that may be, we're going to do that value over 2 and we're going to square it, and then we're going to add that on both sides. Okay, step 3, factor, and then step 4, solve. Okay, so again, these steps are going to make a lot more sense as we go through the problems and you start getting exposure to what you actually have to do here. So let's take a look at the first example. So here's our first example, and I just want to remind you, I did put the template down here in the right-hand corner in case you forgot the format that we need to be in. So right now, I am not in the correct format. If I'm following step 1, this is not in the correct format. I need to put all of my constants to the right-hand side, okay? So this negative 18, we have to move it over to the right-hand side, meaning we're going to add 18 on both sides. So before we do anything, we're going to do that first. All right, so plus 18 on both sides, okay? And so we get x squared plus 8x. This will cancel out, equal to 2 plus 18, that will give me 20, okay? So now I am in the correct format. My a value is equal to 1. I can see that I clearly have a 1 here, even though it's not written. And all my constants are moved over to the right-hand side. So now we're going to do b over 2 squared on both sides. So off to the side here, I'm going to write b over 2 squared, and then I'm just going to go ahead and fill in the information. So my b here is 8. So I'm going to put 8 over 2 and then square it. This reduces down to 4, so 4 and then square it. So then I'm left with 16. So I have to add 16 on both sides. Now real quick, I wrote it out for the following reason, okay? b over 2 simplified, which is this part right here. This is b over 2 simplified. You're going to use that when you factor, and this will always work out when you complete the square. Whatever b over 2 is when you simplify it, that's the value you're going to use when you factor. And this can really come into play when you start dealing with things like fractions where factoring it is not very obvious. So when you complete the square, this value right here, b over 2 simplified, will always be the value you use when you go to factor it, okay? But before we do that, again, we have to add b over 2 squared on both sides, which is this 16, okay? So that's what we're going to do. So rewriting the problem, we have x squared plus 8x and then plus 16. Okay, there's that part. And we have to do it on this side here, so 20 plus 16, okay? So from here, now we factor, okay? How do we factor? Well, it's really simple. You can just use this value right here, okay? That's why we underlined it, right? So when I go to factor it, all I'm gonna do is put x, the variable, in parentheses, and then whatever that value is. That value is a positive 4, so plus 4, close it, and then square it. There you go, you just factored it, okay? That will work out every single time. If you were to expand this out, you're going to get this quadratic up here, x squared plus 8x plus 16. All right, you don't even have to check it. It will work out every single time. And then we put equal to 20 plus 16. That will give us 36. Okay, so from here, we're really close to solving it. We just have to get rid of this exponent right here. So we're going to take the square root on both sides. Okay, that will cancel here and here. Take the square root here. So the square root of 36 is plus or minus 6. So now we have x plus 4 equal to plus or minus 6. My last step, I have to move this 4 over, so I get x is equal to negative 4 plus or minus 6. Now, technically, you can leave it like this if you want, or you can break it down into its individual parts. So I need to do negative 4 plus 6. That will give me 2. So x is equal to 2. And then I have to do negative 4 minus 6. That will give me negative 10. So x is equal to negative 10. Okay? And so again, these are going to be our solutions here, or our zeros, however you want to look at it. Remember, these solutions right here are going to be where this quadratic is crossing the x-axis, right? So completing the square is just another way in which you can solve a quadratic. Okay, let's try another example. So here's our next example. Let's go ahead and speed it up a little bit. We need to move this constant over, so we're going to add 12. Again, putting it in the right format first, and then we can go for it, right? This will cancel. I get x squared minus 2x equal to negative 4 plus 12. I get positive 8. Okay. From here, I'm in the correct format. I'm going to do b over 2 squared on both sides. And notice how I'm following the same process every single time, no matter what problem I'm doing, right? I'm doing the same setup over and over again. I'm listing everything out. That way I know where everything is. Okay. Okay. So going from here, my b is negative 2 all over 2. We're going to square it. This is what we really want to look at. B over 2 simplified is negative 1, right? Negative 2 divided by 2. And then we square it. And then finally, negative 1 squared is 1. Okay? So we have to add 1 on both sides. And I'm going to underline this part right here because we're going to use it later. All right? So right here, I'm going to write x squared minus 2x plus 1 equal to 8 plus 1. That will give you 9. I'm just going to write it. Okay? Now we factor and solve. So to factor, super easy. We're going to grab this negative 1 here. So in parentheses, x minus 1, square it equal to 9. Okay. Now we take the square root on both sides. Okay. This will cancel, cancel. Square root of 9 is plus or minus 3. So we get x minus 1 equal to plus or minus 3. And then we just have to add 1 on both sides. So we get x is equal to 1 plus or minus 3, right? Adding that negative 1 over. So breaking it down into its individual parts, we get x is equal to 4. That's 1 plus 3. And then x is equal to 1 minus 3. That will give us negative 2. Okay, there it is. Okay, that's solved. All right, let's try 2 more problems. Okay, so here's the next problem. And again, very similar setup. We're just going to go ahead and go for it. So I'm going to add 36 here on both sides. Okay, cancels x squared minus 4x equal to, this will give me 45, right? 9 plus 36. Okay, I'm in the right setup. I'm going to go ahead and do b over 2 squared. Again, writing it out. So we have to square that. So my b is negative 4. This simplifies down to negative 2 squared. We're going to use this later. And then negative 2 squared will give you positive 4. So I have to add 4 on both sides. So x squared minus 4x plus 4 equal to 45 plus 4, which we know is going to give us 49, but we'll do that after. So let's go ahead and factor it. So x in parentheses, and then again, we're using this negative 2 as our value. Negative 2, square it, done. You just factored it, right? Super easy. equal to 45 plus 4, we get 49. Okay? Take the square root on both sides, and then we're almost done. So cancels, cancels. Here I get x minus 2. I'm going to write it over here. X minus 2 equal to square root of 49 is going to give you plus or minus 7. And then we just have to add 2 on both sides. So x equals 2 plus or minus 7. Okay? Breaking it down into its individual parts, we get the following. We get x is equal to 2 plus 7 will give you 9. And then x is equal to 2 minus 7, that will give you negative 5. So we get 9 and negative 5. That problem is done. Okay? All right, let's try one more example. So here's our last example. Again, same type of setup. We're going to go ahead and clean it up, make sure we're in the right format, and then we can go for it. So minus 32 on both sides. This will cancel. I get x squared minus 16x equal to negative 7, negative 32. I get negative 39. Okay? We are now in the correct format. We're going to do b over 2 squared on both sides. So b over 2 squared equal to, now my b is negative 16, so negative 16 all over 2 squared equal to negative 8 squared, right? And we're going to underline this part right here because we need it later. Negative 8 squared will give you positive 64, right? So we have to add 64 on both sides. So I'm going to get x squared minus 16x plus 64 equal to negative 39 plus 64. Okay? From here, we can go ahead and factor it, and then we can solve it. So factoring it, again, super easy. Put x in parentheses, and again, we're using this value right here, negative 8. Okay, so negative 8, square it equal to negative 39 plus 64. That will give us 25, right? And now we just have to take the square root on both sides. And we're almost done. So the square root of 25 is going to give you plus or minus 5. So I get x minus 8 equal to plus or minus 5. And then we just have to add 8, right? So x is equal to 8 plus or minus 5. Okay? Breaking it down into its individual parts, we'll have x is equal to 8 plus 5. That's going to give you 13. And then we'll have 8 minus 5. That will give you 3. So x is equal to 3 here, right? So we get 13 and 3. All right? So that is how you complete the square when a is equal to 1. It's pretty straightforward. Just make sure that you're in the correct format, okay? Once you're in the correct format, then you can go ahead and add b over 2 squared on both sides. And then, again, you're just going to factor it and solve it. So hopefully you found the video helpful. If you need more examples of completing the square when a is not equal to 1, I do have a video on that. And again, I will link that in the description box below. That way you have access to that content. So make sure you check it out. And so again, if the video did help you, if you could just go ahead and give it a thumbs up, that would be greatly appreciated. Also, make sure you subscribe to this channel so you get more math videos in the future, and I'll see you in the next one.